ask unanimous consent that proceedings under the call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm pleased to join some of my colleagues today to speak about the key role that woody biomass can play in helping to meet our nation's renewable energy needs. Last night, an amendment that several of us introduced was adopted by a voice vote. I want to thank the sponsors of that amendment who have joined with me: Senator Klobuchar, Senator King, Senator Ayotte, Senator Franken, Senator Daines, Senator Crapo, and Senator Risch, all of whom worked hard to craft this important amendment. Mr. President, there's been a great deal of misinformation regrettably circulated about the amendment, which I hope we'll be able to clarify through a colloquy on the floor today. I know that the lead Democratic sponsor of the amendment, Senator Klobuchar, would like to speak on it and has an engagement, so I'm going to yield to her before giving my remarks. And I want to thank her for her leadership.
Well, Mr. President.
Senator from Minnesota.
Thank you so much to Senator Collins for her leadership and for her illuminating the rest of the Senate. Maybe not everyone has many trees as we do and as much biomass, and I really appreciate what she's done here. I was proud to co-sponsor this bill and be one of the leads on it with Senator King. The amendment moves us forward in really recognizing the full benefits of the use of forest biomass as a homegrown energy solution. I'd also like to thank Senator Cantwell, Senator Makowski for their work on this energy bill and the inclusion of this amendment, an amendment that encourages interagency coordination to establish consistent policies relating to forest biomass energy. We've always talked about how you just don't want to have one source of energy in this country, whether it's hydro, whether it's nuclear, you name it, and we want to recognize the importance of this forest biomass energy and talk a little bit about it today. I've sent letters to the EPA, spoken with administration officials, urging them to adopt a clear biomass accounting framework that is simple to understand and implement. Without clear policies that recognize the carbon benefits, and I'll say that again, the carbon benefits of forest biomass, private investment throughout the biomass supply chain will dry up, and the positive momentum we've built toward a more renewable energy future would be lost. Supporting homegrown energy is an important part of an all-of-the-above energy strategy. Biomass energy is driving energy innovation in many rural communities. The forest industry in my state and those that work in that industry is already playing a significant role in the biomass energy economy, and there's always room to do more. I appreciate the discussions between my colleagues yesterday on the language of this amendment, and I'm pleased we ultimately, including with Senator Boxer's help and others, found a solution that moves us forward. I know there's interest in continuing these conversations, and I look forward to do so. Thank you very much to Senator Collins. Mr. President.
Senator from Maine.
President. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I thank the senator from Minnesota for her leadership. I, too, want to thank the two floor managers of this bill, the chairman, Senator Murkowski, her partner, Senator Cantwell, for working so closely with us. The fact is, Mr. President, that biomass energy is a sustainable, responsible, renewable, and economically significant energy source. Many states, including mine, are already relying on biomass to help meet their renewable energy goals. Renewable biomass produces the benefits of establishing jobs, boosting economic growth, and helping us to meet our nation's energy needs. Our amendment supports this carbon-neutral energy source as an essential part of our nation's energy future. The amendment which was adopted last night is very straightforward. It simply requires the Secretary of Energy, the Secretary of Agriculture, and the Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency to jointly ensure that federal policy relating to forest bioenergy is consistent and not contradictory, and that the full benefits of forest biomass for energy, conservation, and responsible forest management are recognized. It concerns me greatly that some have suggested that our amendment would somehow result in substantial damage to our forests and the environment. Nothing could be further from the truth. Forests in the United States are robust and sustainably managed, and climate science has consistently and clearly documented the carbon benefits of utilizing forest biomass for energy production. Moreover, healthy markets for biomass and forest products actually help to conserve forest land and keep our working forests in this country. Our amendment also echoes the principles outlined in a June 2015 letter, a bipartisan letter that was led by Senator Merkley and myself, and that was signed by 46 senators from both sides of the aisle. Our letter stated, our constituents employed in the biomass supply chain deserve a federal policy that recognizes the clear benefits of forest bioenergy. We urge you to ensure that federal policies are consistent and reflect the carbon neutrality of forest bioenergy. The administration, in response to our letter, noted that DOE, EPA, and USDA will work together to ensure that biomass energy plays a role in America's clean energy future, and that is precisely the importance of our amendment, to make sure that that happens. The carbon neutrality of biomass harvested from sustainably managed forests has been recognized repeatedly by numerous studies, agencies, institutions, and rules around the world. The carbon-neutral biomass energy derived from the residuals of forest products manufacturing has climate benefits. Scientists have confirmed that the ongoing use of manufacturing residuals for energy in the forest products industry has been yielding net climate benefits for many years. These residuals, Mr. President, such as bark and sawdust, replace the need for fossil fuels and provide significant greenhouse gas benefits, which some scientists have estimated to be the equivalent of removing approximately 35 million cars from the road. As forests grow, carbon dioxide is removed from the atmosphere through photosynthesis. This carbon dioxide is converted into organic carbon and stored in woody biomass. Trees release the stored carbon when they die, decay, or are combusted. As the biomass releases carbon as carbon dioxide, the carbon cycle is completed. The carbon in biomass will return to the atmosphere regardless of whether it is burned for energy, allowed to biodegrade, or lost in a forest fire. Mr. President, in November of 2014, 100 nationally recognized forest scientists representing 80 universities wrote to the EPA stating the long-term carbon benefits of forest bioenergy. This group weighed a comprehensive synthesis of the best peer-reviewed science and affirmed the carbon benefits of biomass. A literature review of forest carbon science that appeared in the November 2014 Journal of Forestry confirms that, quote, wood products and energy resources derived from forests have the potential to play an important and ongoing role in mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. So, Mr. President, federal policies for the use of clean, renewable energy solutions, including biomass, should be clear and simple and reflect these principles. We should not have federal agencies with inconsistent policies when it comes to such an important issue. Again, I want to thank the sponsors and co-sponsors of my bill, my amendment, as well as the chairman and ranking member of the Energy Committee for their cooperation in getting the amendment adopted last night. Mr. President, I would like at this point to yield to my colleague from Maine, Senator King, who made this a tripartisan amendment when we offered it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senator from Maine.
Mr. President, as usual, my senior colleague from Maine has outlined this issue exceptionally well and covered the important points. I think I would just like to add and amplify a few. The first thing I would say is that I yield to no person in this body in terms of their commitment to the environment, their commitment to ending our dependence upon fossil fuel, and our facing of the challenge of climate change. This biomass discussion is a way of helping with that problem rather than hindering it. The important term in all of this discussion is the word fossil. The issue that we're facing now with climate change and with increased CO2 in the atmosphere is because we are releasing CO2, we are releasing carbon that has been trapped in the Earth's crust for millions of years. We are adding to the carbon budget of the atmosphere. Biomass is carbon that's already here. It's already in the environment. It's in the trees, and it is simply being circulated, and there is no net addition of carbon to the atmosphere because of the use of biomass. I have been in this business, I have been in the renewable energy business now for more than 30 years and have worked in hydro, biomass, energy conservation on a large scale, and wind power. So I have some background in this, and a biomass plant typically burns fuel that would not otherwise enter into the economic stream of timber. It's often bark, mill waste, ends of logs, branches, the kind of thing that otherwise lies on the forest floor, dies and decays and releases carbon. There is no net addition of carbon. Now, to be intellectually honest, you have to say that burning it releases that carbon somewhat sooner than it would be otherwise released, but in the overall term, we're talking about a renewable resource. And in New England, and I suspect around the country, I know in Maine, there is substantially more trees in the forest today than there were 150 years ago, because of the number of farms that have been returned to their natural state of forestry. And that has given us an opportunity to develop an energy source that is a lot more safe and supportive of the environment than the other fossil fuel elements that we have seen that have really contributed to the CO2 problem in this country. So I think this is a common sense amendment. It basically tries to get the federal government on the same page on this issue consistently across the agencies, and it makes the point that as long as we're talking about sustainable management, we're talking about what amounts to a continuous renewable resource, we are not adding to the carbon burden of the atmosphere, and therefore I think this is a common sense amendment that will not set back our efforts with regard to climate change, but will actually advance them. So I'm happy to support this amendment, to support my colleague from Maine. I think this is the kind of common sense thing that actually belongs. It's a very important part of this bill, strengthens it considerably in my view, and I want to again thank my senior colleague for bringing this bill forward.
Mr. President.
Senator from Maine.
Mr. President, I just want to thank my friend and colleague from Maine. He has enormous expertise in the area of renewable energy, and I very much appreciate his adding his expertise to this debate. Mr. President, before yielding the floor, I would ask unanimous consent that a letter dated June 30th, 2015, signed by 46 senators, be on this very issue that was addressed to the Administrator of EPA, the Secretary of Energy, and the Secretary of Agriculture be printed in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Oregon.
Mr. President, I'm delighted to join our senator from Maine, or our two senators from Maine, Senator Collins and Senator Angus King, in this dialogue, as well as Senator Klobuchar, and I believe a few other senators may join us. Senator Collins has been a great leader in advancing the debate or the conversation, recognizing the carbon benefits of biomass. Her state, and of course Senator King's state, is so much like Oregon. If you fold the map of the United States in the middle, put east and west on top of each other, Oregon and Maine end up closely associated. We have similar coastlines, and we have shellfish industries, we have timber industries, we have salmon runs, we have similar initiative systems, and our largest cities are named Portland. I know that when I had the pleasure to visit Maine, and I went there with my wife and children to visit friends from many walks of our two lives, my wife's life and my life. We just went from town to town visiting these friends who had moved to Maine, and we'd pick up a newspaper and we felt like we were right at home in Oregon with actually the same initiatives were being done at that time in the state as we had on the front page back home. And this issue of biomass is close to our hearts in the forests of the Northeast and the forests of the Northwest. When I first came to the Senate and the conversation was going forward about renewable energy, Senator Dorgan from North Dakota, now retired, said that his home state was the Saudi Arabia of wind energy. And then Senator Reed from Nevada, I heard him say that Nevada is the Saudi Arabia of solar power. And then there was a county commissioner from Douglas County, the county that I was born in, which is the largest concentration of Douglas fir trees. It's enormous biomass area, if you will, referred to how Douglas County could be the Saudi Arabia of biomass energy. And I thought, with all these Saudi Arabias here in the United States, why are we still importing oil from Saudi Arabia? But indeed, these efforts to develop an alternative, to pivot from fossil fuels to a clean energy economy, should include solar and should include wind and should include biomass. When I came to the Senate, I undertook the project of helping the Environmental Protection Agency recognize that you have to look at the life cycle, that you can't simply look at the moment of combustion. You can't compare coal being burned in a coal furnace or oil in an oil furnace and say that's equivalent to wood being burned in a biomass furnace, because indeed, as you take that biomass, that wood, you are engaged in a life cycle that doesn't involve bringing more carbon out of the earth and adding it to the cycle in the ground. And our colleague Angus King from Maine was referring to that difference earlier in his comments. Anyway, it's been an effort to make sure that our government takes account of this significant contribution of forest biomass. And in the Northwest, biomass is the potential for a win-win as a renewable source and improving forest health. And Senator Collins was referring to the goals of responsible forest management and conservation. And indeed, if you drive along the roads in our national forests in my home state, you will see slash piles. And these piles are there because as we go through for forest health, we thin the trees. If they're good saw logs, we take them off to the mill, but the debris remain and we put it into piles. And then the goal is to remove those piles. But often, there is no economical way to remove those piles, and then you have to burn them in the forest. Just a couple months ago, I was out in a forest in southern Oregon with a torch, lighting fire to these piles. And the situation is often such that in this case, it was an area where there's often a temperature inversion, and you get smog from the smoke, and so they can only be burned a couple days a year, so it's a big challenge. But isn't it so much better to be able to take those piles of biomass and put them to work instead of burning them in the forest, burn them in a situation that produces heat and electricity? That is a win-win outcome. So when you hear people in the Northwest talk about forest biomass, there's a lot of excitement about how to grow this market. A market as a means of improving the health of our forests while providing a renewable source of energy. On private lands, a growing domestic biomass market also has the potential to create a new value stream for our forest landowners. By adding another value stream for forest landowners, biomass can create incentives to keep forest land as forest and avoid conversion to a non-forest use. The modification made to Senator Collins' amendment reflects this dynamic, that one of the contributions to emissions in the forest sector is actually the conversion of forest land to non-forest use, because the trees are no longer there to sequester carbon. So if we can help prevent this, that is a beneficial side effect of this overall effort on biomass, to amplify the role of forests, not to remove them. The most important example of that has been brought up as a concern that doesn't fit this model of conservation or burning the byproducts is whether entire forests might be ground up and used to create pellets or so forth. I believe, and I certainly will be corrected if I'm wrong, that certainly is not the framework in which this amendment is crafted, with a dedication to enhancing the health of our forests and energy and forest conservation. I think this amendment sends a clear signal to EPA that in many cases forest biomass is carbon neutral, should be treated as such. It reinforces a conversation we've been having since I came here over the last 7 years and earlier with Senator Collins' hard work. When EPA takes regulatory action, it should reflect these opportunities where biomass is carbon neutral. In fact, policies like clean power plants should provide an incentive for forest biomass that is carbon neutral. And I look forward to continuing to work with my colleagues on this topic, because this is a very significant win-win opportunity for energy, for the environment, and those are the type of opportunities we should seize. Thank you, Mr. President.